Department head called me in with a satisfied grin. "Kelly, we're bringing in someone younger for your role. After 10 years, time to move on." I nodded calmly. I appreciate the notice. They didn't know one little detail. Next board meeting would be special. I was called into Thomas Miller's office by the department head, who greeted me with a self-satisfied smile. "We're bringing in someone younger for your position. After 10 years, it's time to move on," he said. I nodded steadily and replied, "Thanks for the notice." What they didn't realize was that the upcoming board meeting would be anything but routine. Inside, I vowed, "You're not going to take this opportunity from me," my tone rising as I stepped fully into his office. Thomas looked up from his desk, his smile making my stomach twist. After a decade of hard work at Peterson Engineering, this was supposed to be the end. "My name is Kaylee Thompson, and at 52, I've dedicated the last 10 years to one of San Francisco's premier engineering firms, weathering 3 restructurings, 2 economic downturns, and countless late nights perfecting designs. I believed I was indispensable." "Kaylee, please sit down," Thomas instructed, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. His tone was that of a rehearsed sympathy, the kind you'd learn in HR training. "We're bringing in someone younger to fill your role. After 10 years, it's time to move on." Those words hung in the air. Younger. Not more experienced or more qualified. I felt a familiar heat of indignation rising in my chest, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't the moment for an emotional outburst. I simply nodded and said, "I appreciate the notice." Clearly thrown off by my calm response, Thomas blinked in surprise. "Well, good. I'm glad you understand. The transition will happen over the next month. We need you to train your replacement, Olivia. She graduates from Berkeley next week." I managed a thin smile. What Thomas didn't know, and neither did anyone in our department, was that the next board meeting would be very special indeed. I asked, keeping my voice even, "Will there be a formal announcement?" Thomas replied, already turning his attention back to his computer, "We'll announce it at Monday's department meeting." He added casually, "HR will be in touch about your severance package." I stood and smoothed my blazer. "I see. And the quarterly board meeting is still set for next Thursday at 2 p.m. Thomas looked up, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Yes, but that's nothing for you to worry about." I lightly added, "Just double-checking my calendar. Will CEO Davis be in attendance?" His eyes narrowed a bit. "Why do you ask?" I shrugged and said, "Oh, just curious." "Well, I won't take up any more of your time," he said, dismissing me. As I walked back to my desk, I felt oddly composed. 10 years at Peterson Engineering had taught me patience, resilience, and the art of knowing when to speak up and when to stay silent. The upcoming board meeting would reveal everything, and Thomas Miller's smug satisfaction would vanish faster than the bay's morning fog. Some secrets, it seemed, were worth keeping, even when you're being shown the door. Returning to my workspace, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. A decade of dedication reduced to a brief 15-minute meeting, yet I held information that would turn the entire situation on its head. "Everything okay?" asked Javier from the cubicle next door, his genuine concern evident. He'd seen too many colleagues leave Thomas's office with shock and disappointment written on their faces. "Never better," I murmured, careful not to attract attention. "Just the usual Friday drama." I hadn't shared with anyone the details of a private meeting I'd had with CEO Catherine Davis 3 weeks earlier. It had come as a surprise, a call directly to my personal cell on a Sunday afternoon while I was tending to my rooftop garden. "Kaylee, we need to talk about your future at Peterson," Catherine had said, her tone formal yet relaxed. "Can you meet me at Bayo Cafe tomorrow at 7 a.m.? The memory of that morning remained vivid. Catherine arrived early and secured a quiet corner table with the stunning view of the Golden Gate Bridge, shrouded in morning mist. "I'll get straight to the point," she said after our pleasantries. "The board is restructuring our leadership. We've been closely watching your work on the West Lake project. Your innovative solutions have saved us millions and impressed our top clients." I had braced myself for bad news, not praise. "Thank you," she continued. "But we want you on the executive board, as our new chief operations officer. You understand both the technical and human sides of our business like no one else does." The offer was as unexpected as it was overwhelming. A seat on the board overseeing all operations at Peterson Engineering, including Thomas's department. "Why me?" I asked, still processing the magnitude of the opportunity. "Because you see what others miss," Catherine replied simply. "And because it's time we had someone at the table who remembers what it's like to work in the trenches." She explained that the secrecy was intentional. The board vote was just a formality. I need to manage the internal politics carefully. Some members, especially those connected to Thomas, might interfere if they learned too soon. You'd sign the contract with only me and the company's legal counsel present. For 3 weeks, I attended early morning strategy sessions disguised as vendor meetings, pored over confidential reports, and helped draft a new operational framework. All while Thomas schemed my removal. Back at my desk, I checked my phone to find a message from Catherine confirming that the contracts were filed and the announcement was set for Thursday. I responded with a single thumbs-up emoji. The rest of the afternoon was spent drafting transition notes for my replacement, as Thomas liked to call it. He passed by twice, clearly enjoying his moment of perceived victory, but the real revelation was just 6 days away. The weekend dragged on as I prepared for what promised to be the most consequential week of my career. Monday morning arrived and I got to the office early, dressed in the same professional attire I'd worn for years, nothing to hint at the impending change in my status. The department meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room. I took my usual seat near the middle of the table, blending in as engineers and project managers filed into the room, buzzing with typical Monday energy, chatting about weekend plans, project deadlines, and industry gossip. Thomas entered last, accompanied by a young woman I hadn't seen before. She couldn't have been older than 23, with a nervous smile and wide eyes taking in every detail of the room. "Good morning, everyone," Thomas announced, clapping his hands. "Before we dive into project updates, I have an important announcement." The room fell silent, and several colleagues glanced my way, anticipating what was coming. I'd like to introduce Olivia Parker, who will be joining our team as Senior Design Engineer over the next month. She'll be working closely with me, since Kaylee will be leaving us to pursue other opportunities. It was the corporate way of saying I was being pushed out. I maintained a neutral expression as sympathetic and curious looks turned in my direction. "Kaylee has been with us for 10 years, Thomas continued, as if bestowing a great honor by acknowledging my service. "We appreciate her contributions. Please make Olivia feel welcome as she transitions into this key role." Olivia offered a small wave. "I'm really excited to join the team. I've heard so many great things about Peterson Engineering." Throughout the meeting, as project updates and quarterly targets were discussed, I noticed Thomas watching me closely, perhaps expecting an outburst or a sign of distress. Instead, I contributed normally, sharing insights on my current projects and even volunteering to help with the challenging client issue. After the meeting, Olivia approached me tentatively. "Miss Thompson, Thomas said you'd be showing me the ropes this week." "Of course," I replied, gesturing for her to follow me to my workspace. "Please call me Kay." As we walked, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was just another pawn in Thomas's game, unaware of the complicated dynamics she had stepped into. "The first thing you should know," I said once we reached my desk, "is that working at Peterson is as much about office politics as it is about technical skill." Olivia looked surprised. "I thought it would be more merit-based," she admitted. I smiled gently. "It should be. Maybe someday it will be again." The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of knowledge transfer sessions, project handoffs, and meticulous documentation of my workflow. Through it all, I maintained a professional demeanor, giving Olivia every advantage I could without revealing my true circumstances. On Wednesday afternoon, Catherine called a company-wide meeting for Friday morning, the day after the board meeting. The email teased exciting organizational changes and new leadership announcements. Thomas read the message with a frown, clearly unaware of what Catherine had planned. As he passed my desk, he asked casually, "Do you know what this is about?" I lied smoothly. "No idea. Maybe they finally found someone for that long vacant VP role." Satisfied with my response, he nodded and walked away. Thursday approached rapidly, the day of truth. That morning, I felt an unusual calm wash over me. I prepared meticulously, choosing a tailored charcoal suit paired with a subtle jade silk blouse that brought out the green in my eyes. It was a sharp executive look, nothing out of character for me. When I arrived at work, I discovered my going-away party already in progress. A pitiful spread of supermarket cupcakes and lukewarm coffee in the break room. Colleagues had signed a card filled with generic well-wishes and memories of past projects. I accepted their condolences with grace, playing my part in this corporate theater. "We'll miss you around here," said Javier, giving me an awkward side hug. "It won't be the same without your problem-solving magic." "Thank you," I replied sincerely, knowing many of these were genuine colleagues who had nothing to do with Thomas's schemes. "I'll miss this team too." At the edge of the gathering, Thomas kept glancing at his watch. The board meeting was set for 2 p.m., and as department head, he needed to prepare his quarterly presentation. "Could I see you in my office when you're done here?" he called out. I didn't wait for a response as he walked away. 15 minutes later, I sat across from him while he methodically shuffled papers on his desk. "I want to thank you for handling this transition so professionally," he said without looking up. "It's refreshing, especially considering your long tenure here." His emphasis on tenure was a not-so-subtle reminder of my age. I replied evenly, "That seems fitting." After a long pause, Thomas finally met my eyes. "Your severance package is generous, 2 months' salary plus payment for unused vacation days. The paperwork will be ready for your signature tomorrow." I nodded. "I appreciate that." Leaning back, he asked, "I have to ask, you've been surprisingly calm about all this. Did you see it coming?" I gave a small, mysterious smile. "Let's just say I've learned to prepare for every eventuality during my time here." Thomas's expression darkened slightly. "Well, companies evolve. Fresh perspectives become necessary. I'm sure you understand." I agreed, Change is inevitable, even when it comes from unexpected directions. His eyes narrowed at my cryptic response, but before he could press further, his phone buzzed with a reminder. The board meeting was imminent. Of course, I said, standing to leave. Good luck with your presentation. I've always found the board to be quite detail-oriented. As I walked out, I could sense a new uncertainty in his gaze. My calm acceptance had sown just enough doubt. Back at my desk, a text from Catherine appeared. Conference room A130. Use the executive entrance. I spent the next 2 hours carefully organizing my workspace, backing up personal files and drafting detailed instructions for Olivia. To anyone watching, it was simply thorough preparation before my departure. At 1:15, I grabbed my leather portfolio and headed for the restroom, a routine that wouldn't draw attention. Once away from the engineering department, I took the elevator to the top floor, where senior executives worked. The executive suite even had its own private boardroom entrance, a door I'd never used in my 10 years until today. In the hallway, Catherine was waiting. Her normally stern face had softened with anticipation. Ready to make history? She asked quietly. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied. Checking her watch, she added. The other board members are already seated. Thomas will enter through the main door exactly at 2 p.m. Let's be in position before then. Together we walked toward conference room A, the place where everything was about to change. The boardroom of Peterson Engineering exuded power and tradition. 12 high-backed leather chairs surrounded a massive mahogany table that had witnessed decades of critical decisions, and floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of San Francisco's skyline, a constant reminder of the company's achievements. By 1:45 p.m., 10 board members were engaged in light conversation. Catherine nodded toward an empty chair on her right, my designated seat. I felt a brief flutter of nerves, but it faded as several board members smiled in recognition. William Harrison, the 70-year-old chairman, extended his hand. Miss Thompson, we're delighted to officially welcome you. Catherine has spoken very highly of your operational insights. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate the opportunity, I replied, my voice steady despite the significance of the moment. For the next 10 minutes, I was introduced to each board member. Most already knew me by reputation or from past project presentations, but now I was one of them, a peer rather than a subordinate. At exactly 2 p.m., the main door opened. Thomas entered, carrying his presentation materials and projecting confidence. He greeted several board members by name as he distributed copies of his report. Then his eyes landed on me. His expression shifted, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally alarm. Kaylee, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice raised before I could respond. Catherine immediately took control. Let's begin, she announced, gesturing for everyone to take their seats before moving on to departmental reports. I have an important announcement. Thomas stood rooted, glancing back and forth between Catherine and me, clearly trying to understand the situation. Please take a seat, Thomas, Catherine instructed. Once he complied, she continued. As you all know, Peterson Engineering has been undergoing strategic restructuring to better prepare for future challenges. After extensive evaluation, the executive committee and I have pinpointed critical operational improvements needed across all departments. Thomas fidgeted with his pen, no longer in the spotlight. Catherine went on. We needed someone with deep institutional knowledge, proven technical expertise, and the ability to unite different divisions within our organization. I'm pleased to announce that Kaylee Thompson has accepted the position of Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. A round of applause filled the room as several board members nodded in approval. As COO, Kaylee will oversee all operational aspects of the company: engineering, production, supply chain, and quality assurance, Catherine explained firmly. All department heads will now report directly to her, streamlining our decision-making process. Thomas's face drained of color. I wasn't aware of this reorganization, he stammered. The decision was finalized 3 weeks ago, Catherine replied evenly, on a need-to-know basis. William Harrison leaned forward. Miss Thompson's appointment was unanimously approved by the executive committee. Your first task will be a comprehensive review of all departments to identify inefficiencies and opportunities for growth. Finally, I spoke in a calm, professional tone. I look forward to working with all department heads to optimize our operations. Everyone brings value to this organization, though sometimes the right role is needed to fully realize that potential. Thomas's eyes met mine, and he clearly understood the message. His department now fell under my authority, and his earlier decision to replace me would be reconsidered. Catherine smoothly continued. Let's proceed with the quarterly reports. Thomas, you're up first. Thomas stood unsteadily, fumbling with his presentation materials. The confident department head from just days ago had been replaced by a man suddenly questioning every decision that led to this moment. Before you begin, I interjected gently, I'd like to revisit the staffing changes you proposed earlier this week. Perhaps we should reconsider some of those decisions. A heavy silence followed. Thomas cleared his throat, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. Maybe we should discuss departmental staffing after the meeting, he suggested, his voice strained. Actually, I replied, maintaining a neutral tone, since this impacts the quarterly projections you're about to present, we need to address it now. I turned to the board. Thomas has proposed replacing our senior design engineer, the very role I held until today, with a recent graduate who lacks industry experience. Several board members exchanged uneasy glances. The Westlake project is entering its most critical phase, I continued. Changing key personnel now poses unnecessary risks to both the timeline and the budget. William Harrison frowned. Is that accurate, Thomas? The Westlake contract accounts for 20% of our annual revenue. Thomas's presentation folder trembled in his hands. I believed fresh perspectives would benefit the team, he said, his voice sounding hollow, even to his own ears. But with the new structure we can reassess. Indeed, I agreed. I've already spoken with Diana Ford about stepping into the role. Her 15 years of experience and in-depth knowledge of the Westlake specifications make her the logical choice. Catherine nodded. Diana is an excellent engineer. I fully support this decision. The defeat on Thomas's face was unmistakable, but he pressed on with his quarterly report. His usually confident delivery had been replaced by hesitation and frequent references to notes. When he finished, the board's questions were pointed and at times critical, a stark contrast to the easy reception he had once enjoyed. As the meeting moved into updates from other departments, I took careful notes and asked thoughtful questions that underscored my comprehensive understanding of our operations. By the time we reached the new business items, the room's dynamic had shifted noticeably. Board members increasingly directed their questions to me rather than to Catherine or the other department heads. Near the meeting's end, Catherine introduced another agenda item. As part of our restructuring, we will review each department's age demographics and succession planning strategies. Recent data shows that our most innovative solutions come from cross-generational collaboration. She displayed a slide with productivity metrics across different age groups. As you can see, teams with diverse ages consistently outperform more homogeneous groups. C will lead an initiative to ensure we maintain a healthy age distribution throughout the organization. I caught Thomas's eye from across the table and added, experience and fresh perspectives both have value when integrated properly. I look forward to working with all department heads to optimize their team compositions. The meeting adjourned at 4:30 p.m. As board members gathered their materials and engaged in post-meeting conversations, Thomas approached me cautiously. Congratulations on your promotion, he said stiffly. Had I known, you would have made different decisions, I finished for him. I understand completely, he replied, nodding uncomfortably. About Olivia. She's talented but inexperienced. I think she'd benefit more from our junior engineer development program than being thrown into a senior role too soon. Don't you agree? Thomas knew he had no real choice. Of course, I'll inform her of the change. He began, but I quickly interjected. No need. As COO, I should welcome every new employee personally. I'll meet with her tomorrow to discuss her actual role and set proper expectations. Catherine then joined us, effectively ending the conversation. Kaylee, the executive team is gathering for dinner at Bayside Restaurant at 7. We'd love for you to join us. I'd be delighted, I replied, gathering my notes as Thomas walked away. Catherine watched him with a calculating expression. He'll either adapt or find himself increasingly marginalized, she observed quietly. Everyone eventually faces the consequences of their decisions. Some sooner than others, I replied. The sun was setting over San Francisco Bay as I left the boardroom through the executive entrance. Not as a visitor this time, but as someone who belonged. Tomorrow, the company-wide announcement would make my new position official, but today's reversal of fortune was satisfaction enough. The 10 years I'd invested in Peterson Engineering had finally paid off, even if not in the way Thomas had intended when he called me into his office with that self-satisfied grin just days ago. Friday morning's company-wide meeting brought a palpable buzz to the auditorium. Employees from every department gathered, whispering speculations about the organizational changes mentioned in Catherine's email. I stood backstage with Catherine and the executive team, dressed in a navy suit that signaled my new authority, while still keeping me true to myself. A bit nervous, Catherine straightened her blazer and asked, "Surprisingly, no?" I replied, "It feels right." At exactly 9 a.m., Catherine took the stage to enthusiastic applause. I watched from the wings as she outlined Peterson Engineering's vision for the future, emphasizing innovation, collaboration, and strategic growth to lead us into the next chapter. "I'm pleased to introduce our new Chief Operations Officer, Kaylee Thompson," Catherine announced. As I walked onto the stage, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Engineers who had worked alongside me for years stood and applauded. Project managers, who'd seen my solutions meet impossible deadlines, cheered. Even the administrative staff, with whom I'd always maintained respectful relationships, showed their approval. Thomas sat in the third row, clapping mechanically, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," I began, waiting for the applause to subside. For 10 years, I've had the privilege of solving problems at Peterson Engineering, and today I'm honored to help shape our collective future. I then outlined my vision for operational excellence, stressing that collaboration across generations and departments, where both experience and fresh perspectives hold tremendous value, is our real strength. I made brief eye contact with Thomas and added, "Our strength lies in harnessing both." After the presentation, employees approached me with congratulations. Olivia, looking a bit confused, waited until most had dispersed. "Miss Thompson, Kaylee," she began tentatively, "I'm a little unclear about my position now." I smiled reassuringly and said, "Let's meet in my office in an hour. I think you have great potential, just not in the role Thomas originally proposed." As the crowd thinned, I spotted Javier giving me a knowing grin and a thumbs up from across the room. Perhaps he'd suspected something all along. The transition into my new role as COO happened more smoothly than anyone could have expected. By Monday morning, I'd moved into the executive suite on the top floor, a spacious corner office with windows overlooking the Bay Bridge. The contrast to my old cubicle was striking, but I made sure to bring along the small jade plant that had weathered 10 years of engineering crises with me. Some continuity was important. My first official week was packed with meetings, getting to know each department head personally, reviewing ongoing projects, and identifying operational bottlenecks. I made it a point to be visible throughout the building, visiting departments and speaking directly with employees at every level. This wasn't just good leadership. It was a clear message that the barriers between executives and staff were being dismantled. Thomas, for his part, had been notably subdued. Our one-on-one meeting was brief and focused strictly on his department's metrics. He avoided direct eye contact and kept his responses clipped and professional. I neither gloated nor brought up our previous dynamics. I treated him with the same respectful professionalism I extended to every department head on Friday afternoon. Later that week, Catherine stopped by my office with 2 cups of coffee. "So 1 week in, how does it feel?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Challenging in all the right ways," I admitted honestly. "There's so much opportunity for improvement." She nodded, pleased. "The board is impressed with your approach so far. William Harrison specifically mentioned your knack for asking the right questions. I've had years to think about what I'd do differently if given the chance." Catherine smiled knowingly. "That's exactly why you were the right choice. Oh, and I thought you'd want to know. Thomas has requested a transfer to our Seattle office." "Running away?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "He claims it's for family reasons," Catherine replied. "But we both know better." I considered the news thoughtfully. "Let's approve it. Sometimes a fresh start benefits everyone." Catherine raised her coffee cup in a small toast, spoken with the calm assurance of a true executive.